Hello, everyone. Welcome to Parenting Against the Grain. If you're new to this group, I'm Amy Webb. I've started the group. I'm moderating the group. I write the blog, The Thoughtful Parent. So, if you're new, I do try to hop on about once a week or so, every other week or so, and do some sort of live video about a topic that has been talked about in the group or something that I think would be helpful for people. Obviously, the elephant in the room these days is the coronavirus, and so I thought I would hop on for a little while today and see if I could help provide some resources and support for you guys as we all go through this together. So we've been at home since last Friday. That's when they canceled school where we are in Colorado. Most of you guys, from what I understand, at least in the United States, probably have been at home with your kiddos with school canceled for a few days now. It sounds like most places around the country are challenge. Even for someone like me who's been a stay-at-home mom for over 10 years, in the past year, both of my kids have gone off to school full time, and so I was used to having time during the day to work on my blog and write and things like that. So it's a big transition for all of us, I think. And if you're trying to work from home um, and things like that, and you have, children at home, spouses at home that are, can be distracting, it's very challenging. But just as a PSA, you guys probably all know this, but public service announcement here. We're obviously doing this for a reason, and it's important. Social distancing works, and we've seen all the data, and I'm sure some of you have seen all the data that has come out from these various scientific groups and CDC that this is the best that we can do right now to try to keep ourselves safe and to keep other members of our community safe. So it is very important that we are sticking close to home and not having play dates and not doing anything that could spread the disease. So good for you for following the protocol if you are staying at home, and we will all get through this together, and I'm hoping I can be a resource as much as possible. But that being said, as we all know, there's no playbook for this, right? None of us in our lifetime have ever experienced anything like this. Our grandparents' generation went through the Great Depression and went through World War II. Many of, if you're about my age, our grandparents were of that generation. And so we don't have any firsthand experience with anything like this. So we are doing the best we can. And so I think my first piece of advice for all the parents out there is give yourself some grace and some time to adjust. Your kids are going to be okay. They don't have to learn everything that they would have learned at school, at home. Give yourself some time to adjust and kind of think through how you want to what are some of the best coping strategies that you can use during this time. So a couple things I wanted to talk about today. I know there's tons of resources out there for kids right now, and for parents too. I just wanted to talk about really two main things that to kind of get us started, because it looks like we're going to be in this for the long haul. So I'm hoping to do more videos as time goes on. But one thing was to talk about, of course, how do we talk to our kids about this, and especially a little thinking a little bit about our children's individual temperaments. Those of you who have been in this group for a while now know that I talk a lot about temperament and how that affects our parenting. And so I think even in this situation, considering what your child's temperament is and how that might affect how they cope with the situation, I think that might be something helpful to consider, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to move on to this issue that has come up for all of us, which is routines and schedules, and how do we deal with that, with having our kids at home, and some ideas for that. As always, feel free to comment if you're watching live, or you can comment later if you're watching the replay, and I will try to either address questions on here, or I always check back later and I can address some questions. So first off, in terms of, how do you talk to kids about this issue, about the virus and the pandemic, thinking about your child's temperament in this situation can be very helpful, because most of us know kids react very differently based on their temperament and their personality to the same situation. And this is one of the the challenges of parenting, but also kind of one of the unique, interesting things about parenting is understanding how each kid is really so different, even though they're siblings or they live in the same house, or, you know, even if they're biologically related, they can be very different. And so thinking about how your child might react to this news about the virus is helpful to think through. And so if you have a child, for instance, who has a very sensitive temperament, I think this can be a challenging time for kiddos like that. They're hearing a lot from friends. Before school was out, they were hearing a lot from friends. If they, are on the news or hearing the news at all, they're exposed to this information that they may not understand. And so if they have questions, it seems like the best approach that I have read and seen in my own life is to kind of let your child lead in terms of what kinds of questions are they asking, and that be your guide for kind of where you go with the discussion. If they have specific questions about something they saw or something they heard, that's a good place to start. And of course, all of this depends on their age, right? Because, talking to a toddler about something like this versus talking to a 10-year-old is a huge difference. And so I'm just going to talk kind of generally today, but if people have questions about specific ages, feel free to write those in, or I can adjust those in the comments later. So taking your child's lead, I think, is a good way to start, and just seeing what they ask or what comes up in conversation. There's no doubt there's going to be many questions that come up as we go through this. So try to adjust their questions as best that you can with whatever knowledge that you have gained from reading articles and so forth. And the other thing that has come up for us recently is just, be honest with what you don't know. If there's a question that they have that you don't know or that is really unanswerable, because that's the questions we're getting a lot is, when is this going to end? When do I get to go back to school? How much longer will we have to be, isolated? We don't really know the answer to all those questions. It depends a lot on what happens, as this progresses. And so I think if you don't know, it's okay to be honest and just say we don't know. It just depends on what happens and how this, progresses. So I think just being honest about the fact that some of these things you don't know. As I said before, if you do have a child that has more sensitive temperament, I would try to limit how much news they're exposed to. I know we all want to keep informed, but for the most part, I wouldn't have the TV on all day and have these constant news updates. That doesn't really help kids because it's just kind of overwhelming for them. So you can keep informed, through radio or watching stuff on your phone, and then whatever you want to share, you get to kind of filter that out to them in small amounts based on what their questions are. But the main thing with kids, especially sensitive kids, is to help them understand that they're safe and reiterate this, numerous times if you need to, that they're safe and that you're safe, and the things that you can do to try to stay healthy and safe. And that we know what those are now, with washing hands, being careful of our hygiene and covering coughs and all those things, wiping down and cleaning things, and then of course social distancing. So those are things that we know that we can do, and so those are the things that are in our control. So I think with sensitive kids, a lot of times they're prone to anxiety because they jump ahead and say, what if this happens, what if that? Well, those are a lot of times things that we can't control, but there are a few things we can control in terms of our daily routine and things that can help keep us healthy. And so focusing on those things, this is what we can do right now, I think gives kids that are sensitive and prone to more anxiety a little bit smaller world to think about, that they think, helps you kind of narrow things down, that this is what I can control and this is what I can do. And I think also talking a little bit to them about, their mindset also. We're in control of our mindset and how we react to things. We can't control world events. We can't control completely how this is going to play out, but we can control our mindset and what we tend to focus on. So, trying to help them focus on the things that they can still do. We can still go outside, or we can still, FaceTime with our friends and family that live other places and things like that. And so helping them realize there are things that we still can do, and that our mindset about the situation helps control how we feel about it. And so that I think is helpful for kids who are really sensitive and, prone to anxiety and things like that. Um, and as always, like I said before, so much of this has to do with developmental stages, right? If you have a toddler at home or preschooler, chances are their daily routine has changed a little bit. Maybe if they were in daycare or school situation, they're probably not doing that, but much of their daily routine has stayed the same. They're still with you, they're still having meals at regular times, they still have their toys to play with. And so I think keeping those general routines, especially with very young children, that's really what keeps them feeling safe and secure, is keeping those routines up and knowing that mom and dad are safe, or whoever caregivers that love them are safe, and that they're going to be safe if they have questions, and just keeping things simple and not focusing too much on the things that we can't do. So that's a little bit about just sort of talking to kids. And like I said, if anybody has questions, feel free to jump in, or I can address questions later after the video. The next topic that has come up a lot, we've seen all these resources kind of be thrown at us, right, with online and kids activities, and those things can be really helpful. I even wrote an article about a lot of the online and hands-on resources that are available now, because companies and educational resources have really stepped up and come online for us, which is great. And so I think a lot of us are kind of wavering between this idea of having some sort of schedule and routine for our kids versus just kind of playing it by ear and day to day. And so, I mean, I think, you have to be the best judge of what's going to work for your children. I know I had a friend who recently posted that, she has 3 kids, and 2 of them were like, we don't want a routine. We're, just want to do what we can. And then the other child really did want a routine. She actually asked to have a schedule for this time when they're, off from school. So it can get a little tricky to think about what the needs of each child might be. But in general, I would say, think about their natural tendencies, like on a weekend or when they have time off from school. Generally, do they do better with more structure and things to do at home, or are they the type that will just find things on their own and don't require a lot of structure? And sometimes you can kind of play the middle. If you have kids of both types, you can have a little bit of structure, but also a lot of room for flexibility and play. I posted the schedule earlier this week, or I guess on Friday, that we have kind of been sticking to, but again, it's very loose, it's very flexible. We like to have a little bit of routine, mostly for me, but my kids do like a little bit of structure. So we have general periods of the day where we're doing certain things. I try to get some sort of learning in early in the day when their brain is fresh and moods are good. And then later in the afternoon, is a little more relaxed. And so I think trying to listen to what your kids need and see what works and see what doesn't work is helpful. And also realizing that play in most ways is really still learning. So, if they're building with Legos or blocks or drawing or coloring or doing an art project, all that stuff is learning. It's just a different type of learning, especially for very young children. That's the type of learning they do naturally anyway. Pretend play and building with blocks and, all those kinds of things that come naturally to very young children. They will just continue to do those things. Older kids who are used to being in school, it's a little bit different because they're used to that more routine type of schoolwork. So if you have the ability to throw a little bit of that in there, they might, some of that they might feel comfortable to them because they're used to that. But again, we worked on marble runs this week. We did Legos. We're building things out of cardboard boxes. So all those things are learning. It's just in a different way. So I would encourage you not to get too caught up in the fact that everything that you do has to be educational in the sort of rigid sense. There's other ways to learn things as well. The other point that relates to that is, I think I posted something a few days ago, the fact that the life skills that you can learn during this time or help your kids learn can be really great. This is like a perfect time for all those things that you always want your kids to learn how to do, but you never really have time to teach them. So things like sewing, or just simple things like how do you load a dishwasher? How do you work the washing machine, depending on what your kids' ages are, of course. And so, or think, lawn maintenance, if you're in a part of the world where you're starting to get ready for spring weather and you have a lot of yard work to do, all those things are great life skills that kids can learn during this time. We've been trying to include our kids more in cooking because we're obviously cooking a lot at home now. So just teaching some basic cooking skills, that can be a lot of fun, and it is really good lessons in terms of measuring and all those things that come with cooking. So all that stuff is learning, and life skills are still very important even in today's world. We did a thing about typing this week. I think I posted that, where we found a typing program, because typing again is one of those things that schools don't often have time to teach. So if you learn that at home, another thing that schools don't often have time to teach anymore, depending on where you're at, but is cursive writing. Our school no longer teaches cursive writing, so that could be something you could throw into the mix as sort of an added skill that they might not have otherwise learned. So all those things help with learning and just keeping them sort of mentally engaged with something and not zoned out. And of course, we all have our zone out time too. And kids, there's nothing wrong with that. So scheduling in free time or time on screens, whatever works for your household, is a great way for them to kind of relax and de-stress as well. So those are kind of the main topics I wanted to talk about. If anyone has questions or wants to is watching later and has questions, feel free to jump into the comments and add those in. I'm hoping down the line here, how long, depending on how long this goes on, that I want to also talk about self-care, and that will be coming down in the next few days here. I want to really talk about self-care, because during this time when you are with your kids all the time and you don't have a lot of time really to yourself, it gets challenging to figure out how you can really care for your own mental health. So that will be probably one in a future video. Stick with this, parents. I know it's challenging. It's challenging for me to cope with the anxiety of this issue, as well as trying to care for our children. If you have questions or feel like you would need some extra support, feel free to reach out to me. I'm willing to do the best I can to help in any way that I can during this time. Like I said, there's no playbook for this. None of us have the background training for this, right? And so we're all here in this together, and I hope I can help in any way possible. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon.